I got one, the Apple MacBook Pro M1, and I'm going to talk you through the hardware, how amazing it is, and how the software behaves for a .NET and Xamarin developer. So first, let's talk a little bit about the hardware. So the first thing that stands out if you've had other MacBook hardware is that we have only 2 USB ports. It's not really becoming sharp here, but 2 USB ports, and there's no USB ports on the other side anymore. It's just the one 3mm jack, so no lightning, but also only 2 USB-C ports. So, I personally don't mind, because if having a MacBook for a long time, you already need dongles for a long time too. So I have loads and loads of dongles that will help me solve this issue, and I plug it into my docking station anyway. So I don't really have an issue with that, but some people might. But talking about the docking station, natively the M1 only supports one external monitor on the Air and on the MacBook Pro. This is a MacBook Pro. But I get around that issue with using my docking station, which uses DisplayLink, and DisplayLink is kind of a virtual graphics display driver thing. I don't know. And basically what it does, it will emulate kind of the multiple screens. I don't know how it works technically, but it works. So, you have to install some kind of driver. To be very honest, the DisplayLink stuff isn't always that great with the latest versions and everything. I had some troubles getting it set up initially from time to time, but once you have it set up, it just runs and it's perfect. Other than that, the most amazing thing about this, I took it out of the box. It was charged somewhere around 90%, I think, and I got hours and hours of actual installing, updating the OS, doing some actual development work. I think, so I got it on a Friday. I used it a couple of hours each day, and I think I didn't have to charge it until Tuesday or something, and now recording this, I almost have it a week, so I charged it once. I did, again, hours and hours of development installing things, and the battery level is still very high. I didn't actually check the actual number, but it's still, I think around the 90s. So the battery life is really amazing. I'm sure you've heard it before, but it's really true. I know you trust me, so now you've heard it from me, and now you'll believe it. And the other thing is the fan. So in the MacBook Pro, there is a fan. In the MacBook Air, that's only passively cooled, so it doesn't have a fan that can turn on. So it's throttled at the moment that the temperature goes up. But the Pro has a fan, but I did not hear it yet. Again, I installed macOS updates. I installed updates to Visual Studio Mac. I started Visual Studio Mac. I worked with Visual Studio Mac. And normally, whenever I start Visual Studio Mac on my Intel one, because I have an Intel one for ages for work, and whenever I start VS Mac, it basically starts blowing almost immediately. Maybe also due to how I got it set up and the weird thing where you have to plug in your charger in only the right side or the left side. I don't know. But it starts blowing. Well, you don't have to do much to have your fans blowing. I did not hear the fan on this thing, so I'm not sure if it's even in there. I'll trust Apple, but again, this is really amazing. This is really good performance. And they fixed the keyboard. Yes, they did it. They took out the weird butterfly things. Well, I'm sure that it might be some other butterfly thing. I don't know. But the keyboard feels a little bit different than the other recent MacBooks that you had. And I think this should be more stable, breaking less. So that is good. They also brought back the physical escape key. So that's good. It's not part of your touch bar anymore. The touch bar on the MacBook Pro is still there. Again, I use it in clamshell mode. So I have it like this with my docking station, and I use an external keyboard. But when I'm underway, I use the touch bar from time to time, not really that much, but it's on here, so it's fine. But I really love the physical escape key that's back, because that's something that I use often, and it's very hard to not have that feedback on the touch bar and having tried to find it and that kind of stuff. The other thing is it has a dedicated emoji button. What? I mean, before, pro tip right here, you might not even know this, but if you do Control, Command, and the spacebar, you will get a little thing that allows you to enter emojis real easily. But now it even has a dedicated button. It has a little globe on it. So whenever you press that button, I found it out by accident, actually. I didn't know what the button was. It's actually the function keys that also allow you to swap the functions of the F1, F2, etc. keys, I think. And in this case, the touch bar. But you can, whenever you just press that button, it will be the emoji key. So that emoji pop-up will come up and you can just enter in emoji. So that is very, very cool. And that is basically all I have on hardware. So let's just start this puppy up and let's see all the software that I've installed so far and talk you through the things that I encountered. Now, as you might have already guessed, the performance is doing pretty great. So maybe it's because I spend a lot of money on this machine and I just wanted to feel snappier. But especially like even loading web pages is faster, which is crazy, right? I would not expect that that is where we would gain performance. So especially with Safari, which I typically normally don't use. But if you go to google.com, I don't know, it loads pretty instantly. Also github.com, where I'm not really logged in, but you can see it, boom, it really loads very fast, almost instantly. And that is really, really great. So the first thing that I set out to do was get Microsoft Edge, which is the browser I typically use. And that has a native version too. So, we can just go to Edge down here and that just works. It's a little bit less snappy, as you might maybe expect. I don't know. If we go to GitHub, then you can see that I'm also logged in, but it's not as fast. Google also instantly. YouTube.com/Gerald Versluis. You should definitely go there and subscribe right now. But you can see it's still pretty snappy. Like I said, maybe it's just in my head, but I feel that it's pretty great. So other thing that I did after that is install VS Code, which is also natively supported now. I think that was in preview before, but now in the stable version, VS Code is natively supported for the M1. I don't really do heavy duty work with VS Code, so I don't know what else might or might not be working. I typically use it as a glorified notepad, basically. And I do some work in it. I haven't run into any limitations. I think everything that is in here will just work, basically. So that is really cool as well. Actually, I'm very surprised at what is all supported by the M1 natively at this point, because also I have this note-taking app, which is Notion. Let me just quickly open the browser again, notion.so. And that is a great note-taking app to start with. But if you go to download and say Mac and Windows and you say Mac, then this also already has a Apple M1 native version. And that really surprised me that there is a lot of apps out there. I mean, this laptop, this workstation has been out since October, I think. So, people have been time to adjust, but I don't know. I really didn't expect it to see these kinds of apps be supported as well. Now, before I go into the main event with like VS Code, VS Mac and that kind of stuff, let me just quickly go over some other stuff, because I posted something on my YouTube channel with like, hey, what do you want to know that is supported? And I got a couple of things, amongst which is the Azure, so let me just close all of this, Azure Storage Explorer. And I think this is kind of like the same concept as VS Code and is it Electron? I don't know, but it's kind of web-based. You can see also it has that VS Code look. So Storage Explorer, and the other one was Data Studio, I think. These just work out of the box. Oh, you can see I didn't even open this yet. So this is, I'm going to find out together with you if this works or not. But you can see these just work, and I don't expect anything strange here as well. They're probably working under Rosetta, these, looking at how they're not as snappy as the rest of these. But it looks that it just works. So that's great, right? Another thing I already installed was Homebrew. So Homebrew is kind of your package manager for your applications on Mac or your other libraries or dependencies that you can do from the command line. if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. Then you might be missing out. So look into it. But other than that, it just works as it does on your Intel machine. Of course, Xcode is something by Apple, so that just works. No problem at all. It even feels, again, snappier, better than the Intel one, so that is really, really great. And then I think it's time to go into the main event. So let me just close this one's here. And let's open Visual Studio. So Visual Studio runs. It's not M1 native yet. I've seen a roadmap where they announced that they are going to look into actually also doing the M1 native bits, but also a native Mac OS UI. So, it will look and feel even more like something that belongs in Mac OS. So as you can see, Visual Studio for Mac just runs. I'm opening a file new Xamarin.Forms application here. It's called M1 test. Now, again, you won't be surprised that the iOS version just works because, Xcode and all that kind of things just gets configured. To be completely honest, I had some trouble setting Visual Studio for Mac up, and I'm still getting some crashes from time to time. So I'm not sure if that is because of this Visual Studio for Mac version or if that is something that has to do with the M1 bits. But you can see it just launches this project. No problem. Now, for Android, it's a little bit of a different story because for Android, there wasn't an emulator that is supported on the M1 yet. So you have to go out and download a special image. On the download page, it says that it's now supported, more out of the box, but I guess they're talking about Android Studio. Within Visual Studio for Mac at the time of recording, I could not find a way to actually get the right emulator from within Visual Studio for Mac. I will make another video because that's kind of out of scope for this one on how to get that Android emulator and how to get it running. But just whenever you do install it, it will just run without any problems. So if we switch over here to Android, you can see I don't have any other emulators installed right now, but I can go into, I will actually do it through the spotlight right here, and I can say Android emulator, the applications one, here we go. So whenever I just launch that, it launches. It still gives me some kind of an error. I can probably fix this if I look into whatever it's trying to tell me here. But whenever you launch this, it will come up in a little bit, and you can already see here at the top of Visual Studio that it now recognizes that this emulator is running. So just make sure that you have it running, and whenever you do, you can again just press play here, and it will start running as you would expect normally. The debugger can attach, so everything just works. So that's great. Now, together with saying that Visual Studio for Mac runs and Xamarin runs, I also say, of course, that .NET is running. So .NET, I definitely actually have to check what version is installed here, if it's .NET 5 or maybe .NET Core 3.1. But while we're waiting here to actually prove that the Android version is running as well, actually let me just spawn up another Visual Studio instance here. So new instance. I could just do a new instance here because I've also been working on some ASP.NET projects, and that just works as well as you would expect from your typical .NET project. So here Android is running. We can see that the emulator is coming up. And there we go. Our Xamarin.Forms application is running here too. So that just works. So now that this is done, let me just do a file, new solution. And I'm going to create now a cloud. Is it under cloud? Azure Functions. So that's, I didn't try it yet, but I assume that it works too. Did I not? Oh, Web and Console. Here we go. So I can just say web application, do whatever, next. Oh, so I have 3.1. I have 5 too. No authentication, next, M1 test, here we go, create, exists, oh maybe I should not do the same one as my Xamarin one, M1 test web, and it will just create this thing, and I'm kind of confident that whenever I run this, it will come up in Edge. I need to restore my NuGet packages, okay, it did that, let's try again, I was too quick. So no matter how snappy my M1 is, it's still not can keep up with me. So again, to what I was saying earlier, the Visual Studio Mac hang a couple of times. So again, I'm not sure if that's another version, but as you can hear in some of my videos, if you hear, listen really closely, then you can hear the fan of my MacBook blowing. But that is not what's going on here. And I'm just switching around to all these things, installing things, running other things. So, you know, and it just works. It doesn't blow or it doesn't do anything. So that is really, really great. It has no issues doing this. And there we go. We have our ASP.NET Core application running as well. So that just works too. Another question that was under my announcement that I got the M1 was JetBrains Rider. So let's look into Rider right here. And also, I think that is not running natively on M1. They also announced that you're going to look into natively supporting the M1. Actually, while we're talking about this, there is a little trick to see if it is actually running on the M1 natively or it is running on the Intel emulation. Because you can go into the activity monitor right here, and then you can see all the processes, of course. So if I look for Rider, I guess it's called, here you can see JetBrains Rider, and you can see here under the architecture, it says Intel. And whenever we do, I don't know, Edge, you can see the architecture is Apple. So you can tell from this if it's running natively or not. If that's something that you want to know about, then this is a way to check for that. You can see Rider runs as well. I've created a web application earlier, so it just loads that. I try to run it and debug it a little bit. I don't typically use Rider. I should look into it because I've heard a lot of great stories about it. But this just runs, and so what I wanted to say is I didn't really test it extensively, but I kind of assume that whenever you can run it, the rest will kind of also just run and be supported, but maybe that's me just being naive. While we see this coming up and running, there's other things that were requested. Docker, I'm not much of a Docker user too, but I've seen other videos and blog posts with a Docker. I think it's a preview at the time of recording, where they have this running on the M1 as well. Android Studio, again, something that I don't use, but it is running. Parallels, I've also heard that people are running Windows virtual machines through Parallels. These might be in preview versions, I don't know, but I've seen others that have made it work. So that is work in progress, and that's definitely something that is coming. One other thing that was asked is Photoshop. I didn't really look into that, but a little Googling learned me that Photoshop also has a version that works on the M1. I'm not sure if it's natively, but I'm sure that they're looking into it. So again, that should just work. If you have any other requests or things that you want to know if they're working or not before you decide to actually buy that little M1, yes or no, or maybe see a little comparison between the M1 boot up times and the Intel ones. I've got both here now, so I can do a little comparison on that. Please let me know in the comments. Other than that, I hope this was informative to you, and you now know that you're safe as a .NET and Xamarin developer because all the stuff just works. So I think it's pretty clear by now that I'm very happy with my M1. I already also got one response, Apple is so overpriced. Okay, that is totally up to you. I mean, I'm happy to spend it on a machine that can hopefully service me for a couple of years. The other MacBooks that I've had so far stuck with me for years, and I'm really happy with how it all works, how smooth it is, and especially with this NEP step, I think the MacBooks and the M1s, Apple has really blown away the competition, and Intel should be scratching their head to see what they're doing next. Because this, with the battery life and this performance, I don't think anyone was expecting this, and it's really, really great. And back to the .NET and Xamarin scenario, yes, there are still things that should be much more smoother for our developers. We are used to having it work, especially in the Microsoft ecosystem, that it's a lot of the work is done for us. So there's a little bit of manual work with the emulator, which is technically not even Microsoft fault, but Android has to get their support for the emulator up and running. But I think overall, if you're thinking about getting this M1 right now, yes or no, as a .NET developer, if you just stick to web applications, console applications, so basically .NET 5, .NET Core kind of things, or Xamarin, you are safe to get this MacBook and you will love it. Now, you've heard me say things like these things are still in preview, it's coming, it's running under Rosetta. While that is, not ideal, it would be best if everything runs natively and if everything was ready now. This is not a bad thing. I've been using this machine for actual work, not just for trying out things. I'm doing actual work on my personal. This is now my personal machine. I've been doing this on this thing for now, and even if it's running under Rosetta, I don't notice any difference with running it on my Intel Mac. So while it is emulated, while it's not as snappy as the rest, it's definitely not bad too. So, but make sure, whenever you're going to do things, that all the stuff that you want to do works. Of course, I'd be happy to try it out for you if you don't mind me making a video about it. Then maybe the question like, why did I go for the MacBook Pro? I think the Air can even do almost the same thing, but like I said, it has only passive cooling, and also, I don't know, the difference in price for me was not that big, so I decided to just go for the Pro and not run into any limitations further on and smack myself in the head with like, why did I not spend that money on beforehand? So that is basically the only reason why I did it, but of course, this is all things that you have to decide for yourself. Thank you for sticking around for this video. Please click a like button if this is actually something that you've liked. If you're new here, then hey, welcome. Welcome to this channel. This is not something I typically do, but I definitely want to do more. So subscribe to my channel. Let me know what other content you might want to see. Click that little ding, that little bell to be notified whenever new content comes out automatically. And I'll be seeing you for my next video. Keep coding.